Bodo, Ethiopia, 600,000 years ago. A rugged Rift Valley landscape with grassy plains stretches out, broken by wooded patches and a river cutting through. A lake glimmers nearby, fringed with reeds, while volcanic hills loom on the horizon, occasionally smoking. Herds of antelope roam, and a group of Homo Heidelbergensis works near the water's edge, shaping tools and processing their latest kill. Fathers keep watch for lurking predators while mothers tend to their young, ensuring their survival in this harsh yet familiar world. This is the realm of ancient humans, our likely ancestors, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Homo heidelbergensis is a species of archaic human that lived approximately 700,000 to 200,000 years ago, during the Middle Pleistocene epoch, named after the city of Heidelberg in Germany, where the first fossil evidence, a robust jawbone, was discovered in 1907. This hominin is considered a significant figure in human evolution. Since then, Homo heidelbergensis fossils have been found from South Africa to northern Europe, and is often regarded as a potential common ancestor of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans. Based on fossil evidence, they exhibited a mix of traits seen in earlier hominins like Homo erectus and later species like Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. Homo heidelbergensis individuals were relatively tall and robust. Estimates suggest an average height of 5 feet 9 inches or 175 centimeters for males and slightly shorter for females who averaged 5 feet 2 inches or 157 centimeters. Their bodies were stocky and muscular, adapted to colder climates in some regions, with strong bones indicating a physically demanding lifestyle. In terms of weight, males averaged 62 kilograms or 136 pounds, and females 51 kilograms or 112 pounds. Although judging by a shin bone found at the site of Boxgrove, England, which measured 35 centimeters or 13 inches long and had deep muscle markings, suggests its owner stood around 6 feet or 180 centimeters and weighed 88 kilograms or 196 pounds. Though obviously some variation existed, similar to modern humans today. They had a large cranial capacity, ranging from 1100 to 1400 cubic centimeters, averaging 1250, which is close to the modern human average of around 1350 cubic centimeters. Their skulls were long and low, with a sloping forehead compared to modern humans, but less pronounced than in Homo erectus. The brain case was also wider and more rounded than that of earlier species. The frontal lobe of the brain, which helps control thinking, planning, organizing, problem-solving, short-term memory, and movement, and the parietal lobe, which helps interpret feeling, known as sensory information, were enlarged and may indicate an increase in brain complexity. Their faces were broad with prominent brow ridges above the eyes, though not as thick as those of Neanderthals. The midface was somewhat projecting, and the nose was likely wide. Their cheekbones had a swept back appearance, and the posterior skull vault exhibited an occipital bun. Their jaws were robust and lacked a prominent chin, a feature distinguishing them from modern Homo sapiens. Their teeth were large compared to modern humans, with strong molars suited for a diet that likely included tough, fibrous plants and meat. Dental wear, such as scratches and lacerations, along with the presence of a canine fossa similar to modern humans, which is responsible for lifting the corners of the mouth, suggests they used their teeth as tools for processing food and materials. Homo heidelbergensis had a fully upright posture, similar to modern humans. Their limbs were proportionate, with long legs suited for endurance walking or running. Their hands were capable of precision grips, indicating tool-making abilities, as evidenced by the sophisticated stone tools, such as the Acheulean hand axes associated with them. Hairiness and the ability to cool the body by sweating occurred at least 1.9 million years ago, and while direct evidence is lacking, they likely carried this trait on and had sparse body hair, though probably not as sparse as in modern humans. It's postulated that skin tone would have varied depending on their geographic range, which spanned Africa, Europe, and possibly parts of Asia. with darker skin in sunnier regions and lighter skin in northern latitudes as an adaptation to lower UV exposure, similar to modern humans today. Homo heidelbergensis is generally thought to have emerged between 700,000 and 600,000 years ago, though the exact timing varies depending on the region and interpretation of the fossil record. Most paleoanthropologists agree that their likely ancestor is Homo erectus, a widespread species that had already colonized Africa, Europe, and Asia by 1.8 million years ago. Homo erectus possessed a slightly smaller brain and made slightly simpler tools, but its adaptability laid the groundwork for later evolutionary developments. The precise location of their origin remains debated, with two primary hypotheses. Most researchers propose that Homo heidelbergensis first evolved in Africa from local Homo erectus populations. Fossils like the 600,000-year-old Bodo cranium in Ethiopia support this, which showcases transitional traits. Prominent brow ridges, a massive face, and thick cranial bones is similar to Homo erectus, but modern features such as a larger brain size, the shape of the nasal bones, and a brow ridge that was separated compared to erectus's more continuous single brow ridge supports modern traits. This supports an African origin and transition, and from Africa they migrated into Europe. In 2016, scientists also postulated that these 875,000-year-old remains from Ethiopia represents a transitional morph between African Homo erectus and Homo heidelbergensis. An alternative view suggests that Homo heidelbergensis evolved in Europe. For example, the 609,000-year-old Mauer mandible from Germany. The type specimen for the species implies a long presence in Europe, and from Europe they may have migrated down into Africa. In 2023, a genomics analysis of over 3,000 living individuals indicated that Homo sapiens' ancestral population was reduced to less than 1,300 individuals between 800,000 and 900,000 years ago. Professor Giorgio Manzi, an anthropologist at Sapienza University of Rome, suggested that this bottleneck could have triggered the evolution of Homo heidelbergensis. This also lines up with the transitional remains found in Ethiopia. In short, Homo heidelbergensis likely originated as an evolutionary offshoot of Homo erectus, with Africa as the likely cradle, though parallel development in Europe can't be ruled out. Their emergence reflects a slow, adaptive process, bigger brains and better tools, setting the stage for the hominins that followed. The geographic spread of Homo heidelbergensis is a testament to their ability and success as a species, with evidence showing their presence across East Africa, Europe, and potentially parts of Asia. Their wide distribution reflects both their evolutionary flexibility and the diverse environments they inhabited. Sub-Saharan Africa holds some of the most significant fossil evidence of Homo heidelbergensis. The 600,000-year-old Bodo cranium found in Ethiopia that we've already talked about, discovered in the Middle Awash region, provides one of the earliest known examples of the species in East Africa. Broken Hill Kabwe, Zambia, holds the famous 300,000-year-old Kabwe 1 skull, discovered in 1921, indicates the species' persistence in southern Africa. A skull fragment found near Elandsfontein, Saldanha, South Africa, resembles the Broken Hill specimen, further supporting their spread into southern Africa. Homo heidelbergensis then likely expanded into Europe, where they adapted to colder climates. Key fossils include a robust mandible discovered in Mauer, Germany, 609,000 years ago, where here marks their early presence in Central Europe. Fossils including a tibia and butchered animal remains alongside Acheulean hand axes were unearthed in Boxgrove, England 500,000 years ago, suggest they were active hunters in what is now southern Britain. A pit containing over 6,000 bones from 28 heidelbergensis individuals in Cima de los Huesos, Spain, 430,000 years ago, provides the largest collection of Homo heidelbergensis fossils ever found. A skull discovered in Petrolona, Greece, dating to between 300,000 and 200,000 years ago, which interestingly has traits associated with both heidelbergensis and Neanderthal, suggests their spread into Southeast Europe. And the discovery of wooden spears alongside horse remains in Schoningen, Germany, 300,000 years ago showcases their advanced hunting techniques in northern Europe. There are a couple of sites in Asia that some researchers believe are also representative of Homo heidelbergensis, including Dali, China, but because of such a mixed combination of primitive and modern features of the skull, it is difficult to classify. The skull is estimated to be around 260,000 years old. Originally called Homo Sapiens daliensis, it was argued to have been part of a continuous evolutionary line from Homo erectus to modern populations of Asia. Another possibility is that the Dali cranium belongs to Homo heidelbergensis, or a late form of Homo erectus that evolved traits like those of Homo sapiens. Scientists are still working to determine its exact classification, whether it fits into a known hominin group or represents a blend of traits from multiple lineages. To keep things clear, for the rest of the video, I will focus on the African and European fossils that are definitively classified as Homo heidelbergensis. The most visible legacy the species left behind is their stone tools. Homo heidelbergensis is primarily associated with the Acheulean tool tradition, which originated with earlier species like Homo erectus but was refined and expanded by Heidelbergensis. The hallmark of this tradition is the hand axe, a bifacial stone tool typically made from flint, chert, or other hard stones. These hand axes were symmetrical, teardrop-shaped, and versatile, likely used for a variety of tasks such as butchering animals, cutting wood, and processing plant materials. The careful shaping of these tools suggests an advanced understanding of stone knapping techniques and possibly an aesthetic sense or planning ability. In addition to hand axes, Homo heidelbergensis employed a range of other stone tools, including cleavers, which were large, flat tools with a sharp edge, likely used for heavy-duty cutting or chopping; scrapers, which were tools with a sharpened edge for scraping hides or working wood; and flakes, which were smaller, sharp-edged pieces struck from a core, used for finer tasks like skinning or slicing. Evidence from archaeological sites, such as Boxgrove in England, dated to around 500,000 years ago, shows that Homo heidelbergensis used these tools to butcher large animals like horses, bison, and rhinoceroses, indicating they were skilled hunters or scavengers. The precision of the cut marks on bones suggests they had a good grasp of anatomy and tool efficiency. At the very same place in England roughly 480,000 years ago, 30 to 40 Homo heidelbergensis individuals gathered at a gravel pit to butcher a large female horse using stone hammers and flint axes. They stripped its flesh, harvested its organs, and even cracked its bones for marrow. Archaeologists have identified bone tools from the horse's remains as Europe's oldest, used by Heidelbergensis to craft flint blades. Around 1,750 flint pieces have been catalogued at the Boxgrove site, famous for possibly the earliest hominin remains in England. Researchers reconstructed a flint block, dubbed the football, from over 100 slivers, though the tool it shaped is unfortunately missing. Bone hammers were vital for creating these flint tools, showcasing Heidelbergensis' sophisticated understanding of materials, butchery, and social coordination. One notable advancement attributed to Homo heidelbergensis is the potential transition toward the Middle Paleolithic tool technologies, which would later be fully developed by Neanderthals. Some late Homo heidelbergensis populations may have begun experimenting with the Lavawa technique, a more prepared core method that allowed for the production of standardized flakes and points. This technique involved shaping a stone core in advance to produce predictable, sharp flakes, marking a leap in planning and foresight. Additionally, there's evidence that Homo heidelbergensis used wooden tools at sites like Schöningen in Germany, dated to around 300,000 to 400,000 years ago. Archaeologists have uncovered well-preserved wooden spears made from spruce and pine. These spears, some over 2 meters long, were carefully shaped, balanced, and pointed. They are suggested to have been used both as throwing weapons as well as thrusting spears, a sign of sophisticated craftsmanship and possibly cooperative hunting strategies. With these tool-making methods, knappers would have had to have produced some item indirectly related to creating the desired product. which could represent a major cognitive development. Experiments with modern humans have shown that platform preparation cannot be learned through purely observational learning, unlike earlier techniques, and could be indicative of well-developed teaching methods as well as self-regulated learning. Evidence from archaeological sites across Europe and Africa suggests that this species was capable of taking down a wide variety of prey, using sophisticated strategies and tools for the time. Homo heidelbergensis likely employed a combination of persistence, hunting, and ambush tactics, relying on endurance, coordination, and early forms of weaponry. Unlike modern humans, they lacked advanced projectile weapons like bows or atlatls, but they were adept with close-range tools. The ability to attach stone to wood, called hafting, to create spears demonstrates a level of planning and goal-oriented behavior. The discovery of the 8 skillfully crafted wooden throwing spears at Schöningen in Germany provides concrete evidence of their predatory expertise. Down in Africa, the discovery of stone tips potentially attached to wooden spears at the site named Katupan 1 in South Africa provides further evidence of their hunting prowess. The wooden spears they were once attached to did not fossilize, but scientists took matters into their own hands to prove that they once were. Researchers took close-up photographs and put the stones under a microscope to look for the telltale damage caused to stones whenever they are used on spears. We know from experimental studies that when a point is used as a spear tip, the concentration of damage is greater at the tip of the point than along the edges, and that's the same pattern we saw in the Katupan point. The technique needed to make stone-tipped spears, called hafting, would have required humans to think and plan ahead. Hafting is a multi-step manufacturing process that requires many different materials and skill to put them together in the right way. It's telling us they're able to collect the appropriate raw materials. They're able to manufacture the right type of stone weapons. They're able to collect wooden shafts. And they're able to haft the stone tools to the wooden shaft as a composite technology. I think this is telling us that we're dealing with an ancestor who was very bright and almost definitely self-aware. Heidelbergensis was one of the earliest human species to routinely hunt large animals. In Europe, Homo heidelbergensis is known to have consumed the largest of megafauna species present in the region, such as the straight-tusked elephant and rhinoceroses, which have been found at numerous sites with cut marks from stone tools indicating butchery. At the Schöningen site in Germany, there is extensive evidence for the butchery of horses. At the Boxgrove site in England, there is evidence for the butchery of roe deer, horse, and rhinoceros. The inhabitants of Terra Amata in France seem to have been mainly eating deer, but also elephants, boar, ibex, rhino, and aurochs. African sites commonly yield bovine and horse bones, though carcasses may have simply been scavenged. Some sites in Africa and Europe show specific targeting of a single species, which more likely indicates active hunting. For example, Olorgesailie, Kenya has yielded over 50 to 60 individual giant gelada baboons, and Torralba and Ambrona in Spain, which have an abundance of elephant bones, rhino, and large hoofed mammals. The increase in meat subsistence could indicate the development of group hunting strategies in the Middle Pleistocene. For instance, at Torralba and Ambrona, the animals may have been run into swamplands before being killed, entailing, encircling, and driving by a large group of hunters in a coordinated and organized attack. Plants also likely played a significant role in the diet, with seasonally available species being commonly consumed. However, their use is difficult to quantify since they don't preserve as well as animal bones in the fossil record. At the Schöningen site in Germany, researchers estimate that over 200 plant species in the surrounding area were either edible raw or after cooking, yet only a small number have been directly identified at the site itself. Like all archaic humans, Homo heidelbergensis were mobile foragers. They left evidence for both seasonal and differential use camps. In addition to using rock shelters and caves for shelter, they are the first species for which we have evidence of building freestanding structures. At the site of Terra Amata in the south of France, the living floors of freestanding structures have been excavated. The huts were oval-shaped, varying in size from 7 to 15 meters or 23 to 49 feet in length, and 4 to 6 meters or 13 to 20 feet in width. These structures were likely built by setting wooden poles into the ground, covering them with hides, and reinforcing them with stone windbreaks around central hearths, a practical design for a mobile group using readily available resources. It is thought that a group returned to the site annually for fishing and other subsistence activities, and evidence tells us this group reconstructed their huts on 11 separate occasions. Heidelbergensis is also linked to a remarkable wooden structure found near the Colombo River in Zambia. Discovered in 2019 at Colombo Falls, this structure, dated to at least 476,000 years ago, consists of two interlocking logs from the large fruited bush willow tree, notched and shaped with stone tools. It's the oldest known wooden structure, predating Homo sapiens by over 100,000 years. Likely part of a platform, walkway, or foundation, it suggests Homo heidelbergensis had advanced cognitive skills and the ability to modify their environment. A Homo heidelbergensis skull from another Zambian location supports their presence in the region at this time. Archaeological evidence supporting fire control by Homo heidelbergensis includes the presence of hearths, concentrations of charcoal, ash, and burnt bones at sites like Terra Mata in France, dated to around 380,000 to 400,000 years ago, and Schöningen in Germany around 300,000 years ago. At Terra Mata, shallow hollows with ash and charcoal inside oval arrangements of post holes suggest fireplaces within temporary shelters. These hearths indicated that Homo heidelbergensis could maintain and possibly start fires, using them for warmth, protection, and probably cooking. Similarly, at Schöningen, charred wood and heated flint artifacts near the famous wooden spears hint at controlled fire use, although more recent studies using innovative methods have refuted this claim, and say it may have been caused naturally by wildfires. The reason why I said probably cooking is because cooking is a logical extension of the skill of maintaining fire, as it makes food more digestible and reduces the energy needed for chewing tough raw meat. Dental evidence also supports this idea. Compared to earlier hominins like Homo habilis, Homo heidelbergensis had smaller teeth, which might reflect a shift to softer cooked diets that required less grinding and tearing. Another key site for the use of fire is Beech's Pit in England around 400,000 years ago, where burnt flint tools and localized ash deposits suggest fires were deliberately lit and tended. Evidence from Gesher Benot Yaakov in Israel around 790,000 years ago, though slightly earlier and possibly linked to Homo erectus rather than Homo heidelbergensis, shows burnt seeds, wood, and flint clustered in specific areas, implying repeated fire use in a controlled way. These findings suggest that by the time of Homo heidelbergensis, fire was likely a regular part of life for humans. Controlling fire doesn't necessarily mean they could reliably ignite it from scratch, such as by striking flint or using friction skills more confidently attributed to later species like Neanderthals and Homo Sapiens. Instead, Homo heidelbergensis might have opportunistically captured fire from natural sources like lightning strikes or wildfires and kept it burning by feeding it fuel. Maintaining fire over time would still require knowledge of how to manage it, such as selecting dry wood or arranging stones to contain it. Some researchers debate the consistency of fire use at this stage. Sporadic evidence compared to later Neanderthal sites, where fire use is more systematic, suggests it might not have been universal or fully mastered. Natural processes like sediment mixing or accidental burning can also complicate interpretations. Still, the recurring presence of hearths across multiple sites, spanning hundreds of thousands of years, leans toward Homo heidelbergensis having at least a practical ability to control fire. So, while they might not have invented fire-starting techniques, Homo heidelbergensis likely harnessed and sustained fire, using it as a tool to adapt to their environment and improve survival. Their use of fire brings us to the next question. Did Homo heidelbergensis make and wear clothing? Given that they often lived in harsh, cold climates, especially in Europe where they endured ice ages, so living without some form of insulation seems improbable, especially since they likely lacked dense body hair, which hadn't been seen in hominins since the days of Homo habilis a million years before the rise of Heidelbergensis. As Heidelbergensis went extinct so long ago, there isn't direct evidence, like preserved garments or sewing tools, proving Homo Heidelbergensis made and wore clothing, but circumstantial clues strongly suggest they likely did, at least in some form. Archaeologists infer clothing use from a few angles. First, their toolkits. Homo Heidelbergensis made sophisticated Acheulean hand axes and scrapers, found at sites like Boxgrove and Schoningen. Scrapers, in particular, are perfect for processing animal hides, removing fat and hair to make them wearable. No needles or awls show up until later, with Neanderthals and Homo Sapiens around 40,000 years ago. So, if Heidelbergensis wore clothing, it was probably simple, untailored hides draped or tied, not stitched. Comparisons to modern hunter-gatherers in cold climates who use basic hide wraps support this idea. But if they can make shelters like the one we see at Terra Amata, it really isn't that big of a jump to imagine them scraping animal hides to wear as clothing. This practical ingenuity suggests a level of resourcefulness that could extend beyond survival needs, hinting at the potential for more complex behaviors. There's no direct, undisputed evidence that Homo Heidelbergensis created art in the way we typically think of it, like cave paintings or sculptures. However, there are some intriguing archaeological hints that suggest they might have engaged in behaviors that could be considered precursors to artistic expression, such as their crafting of symmetrical hand axes that some researchers argue show an aesthetic sense which might imply a level of care or symbolic thinking. There's also a debated find, a piece of volcanic rock from the Barakat Ram site in Israel, dated to around 230,000 years ago, named the Venus of Barakat Ram. It's a small, naturally shaped object that looks vaguely human-like, with what some claim are intentional scratches to enhance its figurine appearance. Critics say it's just a natural rock with coincidental marks. But if it's deliberate, it could suggest early symbolic or artistic behavior. But even so, it isn't even clear which human species made this. It could have been Homo erectus or an early Neanderthal. Among the finds at Terra Amata that we've talked about are several pebbles with markings that some researchers suggest could represent an early form of symbolic or artistic expression. Some argue they're deliberate, possibly indicating Homo Heidelbergensis had a capacity for abstract thought or decoration, potentially an early step toward art. Others counter that the marks could be natural, from use as tools, or incidental damage, not symbolic at all. No paintings, carvings, or definitive art like what we see from later species like ourselves and Neanderthals have been tied to Heidelbergensis. So, while Heidelbergensis might have had the cognitive capacity for proto-artistic acts, the evidence is thin and indirect. It's more about interpreting their tools and rare oddities than finding a gallery of their work. What do you think? Does a pretty hand axe count as art? All the things we've talked about in this video that Heidelbergensis achieved, the one thing we've all been thinking about is language. Could Homo Heidelbergensis speak? Obviously, there's no definitive proof that Homo Heidelbergensis could speak, as language doesn't fossilize, but several lines of evidence suggest they must have had some kind of vocal communication. The first line of evidence comes in one of the remains found inside the pit of bones at Atapuerca, a hyoid bone, which is an extremely rare and important find and helps us to understand early human anatomy. And it also shows us that a modern human hyoid bone predates Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, and that it must have originated in a common ancestor long before the rise of Neanderthals and ourselves. The hyoid bone is a small bone in the throat which supports the tongue and middle ear bones, capable of finely distinguishing frequencies within the range of normal human speech. A 2013 study by David Meyer on these bones suggests their shape was similar to ours, implying they could produce a range of vocal sounds, unlike the more limited range of earlier hominins. Additionally, Homo heidelbergensis is considered an ancestor to both Neanderthals and Denisovans, who inherited the FOXP2 gene, a key player in speech and language development, also present in modern humans. So it appears that both Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans shared the same variant of the FOXP2 gene, and it predates the divergence of humans and Neanderthal, with Homo Heidelbergensis being the likely one who passed this on, so they might have had the genetic wiring for basic speech. However, FOXP2 alone doesn't guarantee language. It's just one piece of the puzzle. Additionally, judging by dental striations, marks left from using their teeth as a third hand to grip objects alongside their actual hands, suggest Homo heidelbergensis favored one side, pointing to a strong tendency toward right-handedness, and handedness is related to the lateralization of brain function, typically associated with language processing in modern humans. Unfortunately, their vocal tract, which is responsible for shaping sound into speech, and their larynx, or sometimes called the voice box, which houses the vocal cords, which vibrate to create sound waves and manipulates pitch and volume for phonation, is not well preserved, so we can't confirm they had the fine-tuned control for modern speech. Some argue their communication was more like grunts, gestures, or simple vocalizations, expressive but not grammatical. Others, like linguist Daniel Everett, suggest they could have had a proto-language, like basic syntax and limited vocabulary, by this stage, given their brain size and culture. The psychologist Michael Corballis gives a fascinating exploration of the origins and evolution of language in a TED Talk. In this presentation, he explores the complex question of how human language originated and evolved, proposing a theory that challenges traditional views. Corballis begins by emphasizing that language is one of the hardest problems in science. Nobody fully understands how it works or where it came from, yet it's a universal human trait. He contrasts this with a biblical story, the Tower of Babel, which explains linguistic diversity as divine punishment, and then critiques a modern linguistic theory by Noam Chomsky. Chomsky suggests that language emerged suddenly about 90,000 years ago due to a single genetic mutation in one individual, whom he calls Prometheus, which then spread to all humans. Corballis finds this idea biologically implausible, likening it to a miracle that doesn't align with evolutionary principles. Instead, Corballis argues that language evolved gradually over millions of years, rooted in our primate ancestry. He traces human evolution back 7 million years to our divergence from great apes, with modern humans emerging around 300,000 years ago. He suggests that language didn't appear abruptly, but developed through numerous slight modifications, as Charles Darwin proposed for complex traits. A key turning point, he posits, was bipedalism, which freed the hands and face for communication. This allowed early hominins to use gestures, such as pointing or miming, to convey meaning, laying the groundwork for language. Corballis supports his gestural theory with evidence from primate behavior, noting that apes like chimpanzees and bonobos naturally use hand gestures more than vocalizations to communicate. He cites the famous bonobo kanzi, who learned to use symbols and gestures effectively, suggesting that gestural communication predates and underpins vocal language. He also draws on human examples, like the development of signed languages among deaf communities, which are fully grammatical and evolved without vocal input. He proposes that early human language was likely a form of mime, using hands, face, and body to act out events or ideas. Vocalizations, he argues, were secondary, initially supplementing gestures with grunts or simple sounds. Over time, as humans migrated and adapted to new environments, these systems diversified, with vocal language eventually dominating due to its advantages. For example, communicating in the dark or over distances. Corballis estimates that autonomous speech emerged relatively late, around 50,000 years ago, coinciding with an artistic explosion and cultural advancements. Throughout the talk, Corballis contrasts his gradualist, gesture-based model with Chomsky's sudden mutation hypothesis, arguing that the former better fits evolutionary biology and the fossil record. He also touches on the role of brain structures, like mirror neurons, which link perception and action, facilitating the transition from gesture to speech. In closing, Corballis reflects on language's ongoing evolution, noting how digital communication like texting and emojis echoes its gestural origins. He presents language as a dynamic, adaptive trait that has shaped human civilization and continues to evolve. He signs off the talk with a quote, "From the wagging of tongues to the wiggling of thumbs." Its position in the evolutionary tree is based on fossil evidence, anatomical features, and its temporal and geographic range. Heidelbergensis is a pivotal species in human evolution, serving as a crucial link between earlier Homo erectus and later hominins, including Neanderthals, Denisovans, and maybe Homo Sapiens. There is good evidence that Heidelbergensis gave rise to Denisovans and Neanderthals. There are skulls from the sites of Arenstorf, Germany, Fontecava, France, and Cima de los Huesos, Spain, that appear to be transitional in that they exhibit characteristics seen in Neanderthals, such as similar brow ridge morphology, enlarged facial sinuses, occipital bun, etc. It is rare in paleoanthropology to have such good support for continuity in physical characteristics between ancestor and descendant species. In 2013, researchers Matthias Meyer and Svante Pabo at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology sequenced mitochondrial DNA from a thigh bone found amongst the pit of bones in Spain, estimated at 430,000 years old, marking it as the oldest human-related DNA ever recovered and still is to this day. Surprisingly, this mitochondrial DNA showed a closer relationship to Denisovans, known primarily from Siberia, than to Neanderthals, despite the fossil's Neanderthal-like physical traits, although we only know the Denisovans by a finger bone and some teeth, so we can't compare how they compared to Heidelbergensis features. They may have been even more similar. By 2016, the team achieved an even greater feat, extracting and analyzing nuclear DNA from a tooth and a leg bone dated to around 430,000 years as well. Published in Nature, this work confirmed that the pit of bones hominins were definitely the ancestors of Neanderthals, aligning their nuclear DNA with later Neanderthal genomes. This also pushed back the estimated divergence of Neanderthals and Denisovans to around 400,000 years ago, earlier than previously thought. The mitochondrial DNA's Denisovan-like signature remains a puzzle. The researchers postulated that this mitochondrial DNA represents an archaic sequence which was subsequently lost in Neanderthals due to replacement by a modern human-related sequence. Its position as the direct ancestor of modern humans is messier and not as well understood. The once popular scenario had Homo heidelbergensis evolving in Africa from some descendant form of Homo erectus. A portion of the population then emigrated to Europe and evolved into Neanderthals and Denisovans, while a portion of the remaining African stock evolved towards anatomically modern humans. But this view has been increasingly disputed since the late 2010s. A 2019 study of Neanderthal teeth suggests that the common ancestor of modern humans and Neanderthals must have lived over 800,000 years ago. Since teeth can only evolve at a certain rate, the significant differences between Neanderthal and modern human teeth indicate a much older divergence. This means Homo heidelbergensis, which began appearing around 700,000 years ago, is too recent to be that ancestor. So researchers suggested this opens the door for an older species like Homo antecessor to take its place, a hominin species that lived in northern Spain between 1.2 million and 800,000 years ago. The National Center for Research on Human Evolution in Spain have actually been able to extract 7 proteins from a Homo antecessor tooth from about 860,000 years ago, and the team found that the species was closely related to the last common ancestors of humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, but more likely a sister species. This means that we still don't know who the last common ancestor of all these groups were, or the direct ancestor is of modern humans. It is now looking like Africa and Eurasia were inhabited by a whole range of hominin species just a few 100,000 years ago. While Homo heidelbergensis was surviving in South Central Africa, Homo naledi was living in South Africa, and Homo sapiens was emerging in Morocco and Ethiopia. At the same time as all this, Neanderthals were evolving in Europe. The Denisovans were developing in Asia. Homo erectus may still have been clinging on in Indonesia, and two diminutive hominins, Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis, were living the island life in Southeast Asia. It seems that the world was a busy place, and we're only now starting to understand what this may mean for our own origins. The paradigm is changing for the origins of Homo sapiens. Instead of a simple progression from one species to the next, many groups coexisted and sometimes interbred. This was a process that probably happened across Africa. A Science News recent study published on March 18, 2025, suggests we emerged from the mixing of two distinct ancestral populations. The study proposes that modern humans are the result of an admixture event where two groups, possibly Homo Heidelbergensis and Homo erectus, came together about 300,000 years ago. These groups had diverged from a common ancestor around 1.5 million years ago, meaning they'd been separate for a long time before reuniting. The mixing wasn't equal. One population contributed about 80% of our genetic makeup, while the other added roughly 20%. The larger contributor is also thought to be the group from which Neanderthals and Denisovans later branched off, which would be Homo Heidelbergensis, tying our story to those archaic humans. The researchers used a new tool called COBRA, a coalescence-based model that analyzes genetic data to spot ancient population splits and mergers. Applied to human DNA, it revealed this deep ancestral structure, suggesting our origins are more complex than a single lineage. This model aligns with fossil evidence hinting at greater diversity among early humans in Africa. It suggests that our species didn't just pop up in one spot, but formed through interactions across different groups, painting a messier, more interconnected picture of our past. As we draw the curtain on Homo Heidelbergensis, we stand at the crossroads of an ancient story, one that stretches across continents and spans hundreds of thousands of years. This remarkable species crafted sophisticated tools, built shelters, maintained fire, and hunted formidable prey ranging from rhinoceroses to baboons. They may have even possessed a proto-language, helping lay the groundwork for the way we communicate today. Scientists continue to debate their true legacy. Were they our direct ancestors, or an evolutionary branch that left a different mark on history? Soon we may have the answer. Yet beyond the fossils and the timelines, Homo Heidelbergensis offers us a mirror, a glimpse into the resilience and curiosity that define humanity's journey.